This morning on Phone Calls with Friends, Episode 3, we sit down with play-by-play man Jake Elliott. While predominantly known for lacrosse, Jake's seen a lot of sports go down inside these very walls. Let's see what Jake has to say. All right, Episode 3, Phone Calls with Friends. It was just a matter of time before we had Jake Elliott on. Welcome, Jake. And you and I have been working together around Langley Event Center for 9 or 10 years now, so there's plenty of stories. I think the harder part of this one is going to be trying to keep it within reason so people don't just turn us off halfway through.
Yeah, good to see you, man. It's been a while. It's weird. Like, this is probably the longest time that I haven't been at the LEC in some sort of stretch capacity or another. But yeah, I remember walking into the Langley Event Center for the very first time up on level 4. There was still drywall stacked up on the walls, some wood laying around, dust, and all the rest of it when the doors swung open. But hard to believe it's been a decade.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I mean, one of the nice things about with what you can say is that you've seen a lot of it happen here in all sports. You know, I guess you're probably most well known for your lacrosse, but you've done basketball at all sorts of different levels, a lot of hockey here, boxing with Dale Walters. Like, you've really covered all the bases.
Don't forget a little equestrian out there at
a little equestrian, a lot of football. It was that's which is sort of where we're gonna hit off on a little bit of this. And I was sort of thinking that so we don't get too random, there's sort of a few key points in my mind over the years that we've sort of hit, and I just sort of wanted to get your take on those before we let you talk too much about your beloved lacrosse. So why don't we start with that, with the Women's World Football Championships we did 2017, almost 3 years ago to this day. And it was it was a heck of an event, to say the least. And I was maybe from your point of view, what can you remember on that one?
Oh man, I remember a lot of things from the Women's World Football Championship. First thing I remember is Mexico's jerseys being white jerseys with silver numbers on the back. And for anyone that's been to McLeod Athletic Park, where you broadcast from and where the game takes place, it's a pretty big distance in between. And there was virtually no way for me to tell what numbers the players were wearing. So I pretty much just kind of had to make it up as I went along. But, you know, one thing I normally like to do is give out my Twitter handle at the beginning of a big tournament, or whether it be a game or whatever, so fans and things can interact with me. That kind of backfired on me a little bit, as I had never announced women's football before. And I remember early in one of the first games, they ran a flea flicker. And I was amazed by it. I was surprised by it. And I said something along the lines like I wasn't sure they would run that kind of play in women's football. And I got backlash on social media like I'd never seen before, which made for a pretty interesting broadcast and made for a pretty interesting week. But at the general consensus, I mean, women's football is way better than I expected, and I think that sport's got a real bright future. I think more women are going to get into it, and they play at a pretty high level already.
Oh, absolutely, they do that. Yeah, it's funny. The social media kind of went both ways, though, because the interaction was incredible. Like, I remember, like, we were getting 6,000-7,000 views a stream on that event. Like, Finland, England were engaged, and, you know, like, I don't know what time of day it was there. It was the middle of the night. I know some of them were saying, you know, it's 4 a.m. here, and then they were all over Twitter. They knew the players. They were into it. Like, it's unbelievable the support that sport got overall. Like, all the countries that came, there were 6 countries there, and man, were they engaged in it. And like you say, like, I didn't know what to expect. And my goodness, especially the final game between Canada and the United States, like, that was some good quality football.
Yeah, I was into it, man, and the fans were, and, you know, like, I don't want to say that was only negative feedback, because I got a ton of great feedback and interactions on social media as well. It was a lot of fun. And lastly, like, trying to, like, prepare for that tournament and look things up was a bit of a challenge. Like, I had really nowhere to turn. I didn't know who to talk to. But it all worked out. Justin Morissette and myself got to call a bunch of games, and it was a fantastic, tons of fans out there as well. So I don't know if that's ever rolling through back Langley again, and I'd probably be asked back to do it again, but I'd jump at the chance if it was.
All right, let's touch base briefly on another sport now. Another one that had a kind of a fun fan moment, or maybe not a fan moment in it, but let's talk. You got to do the Finley Prep when they came up here in 2012, 2013. And I mean, for people that don't know, that was a really incredible event. We were lucky to host that. You know, the players that came through, Kelly Oubre Jr., which is, well, I'm sure we're going to get to here, but Kelly Oubre Jr., who was, went off to Kansas the next year, drafted by Washington. Now he's fit in really well on the Phoenix Suns team, and he really seems to have found a home there. We had Dylan Brooks, who's playing on an extremely young and talented Memphis Grizzlies team, and those guys were coming through here in high school and putting on, a heck of a show. And it was maybe talk about what you remember from that, but I remember the talent level and the basketball talent that came through here was unbelievable.
Yeah, let's not forget the Junkyard Dog head coach in that squad as well. And you could tell, like, when you saw these guys just warming up, that they were destined for stardom. And a few of these guys were going to the NBA. I'm trying to think, was it the BC High School All-Stars they were matched up against? They were completely dominated, but it was a cool experience to actually get to see that high level and get to call that high level of basketball. That's something I've never had an opportunity to do, to see like alley-oops and two-handed dunks and all sorts of crazy dribble moves and stuff going on in that game. It was a real unique experience. And then a little faux pas, a little snafu at the end of that during the post-game interview, if you will.
Well, yeah, that's funny. And I mean, in everybody's defense that was coming in it, we only had cameras on the opposite side of the court, so we were trying to shoot that interview from a distance. And then you had you're talking to Kelly Oubre Jr., who must have been, maybe he was player of the game or just somebody you selected for an interview after. And then you almost got a visitor interrupt you coming through there.
Well, it was the girl I was seeing at the time, and the game was over, so she came strolling across the court thinking the game was over, and Kelly was sitting beside me. I don't know how she didn't realize she had a headset on, but you got a still frame of the face of Kelly Oubre when he sees, like, she came over and I knew she was about to walk into the camera shot, so I kind of stuck my arm out and was like, "Get out of here," sort of thing, and gave her a look, and Kelly kind of looked at me like, "Damn, do you know that girl?" sort of thing. So it was a funny story, and that's one I'll never forget. That's for sure.
All right. Well, we've kind of skirted it enough here. Like, I know now, going back to 2015 when we first.
Well, let's get no Rivermen. Are we not talking any Riv in there? I mean, some good years with the Rivermen as well, Tom.
Okay, but yeah, there were some great years with the Riv, and you rode the bus with those guys. So it's probably been a while since you rode the bus with a team.
Yeah, for sure. And for anyone who doesn't know, the BCHL, they play most of their games on the weekend. Sometimes they play 3 games in 3 days: Friday, Saturday, Sunday, depending on where they were on the road. But I remember, like, a couple of things, like the bus ride to Prince George was no piece of cake, like, especially being a bigger guy and stretched out on a bus for 9 hours through the dead of night in the middle of winter. A little bit of white knuckling there with Tommy Limo behind the wheel pushing the envelope a little bit, but he got us there safe and sound. But I remember my very first trip was the island swing, where we had Powell River, we had Nanaimo, and Alberni Valley in between there. And we got to Powell River, okay, but then the bus broke down. And this is my first road trip with the hockey team, and I had really no idea what I was doing or how to prepare or how to pack for this thing. So I remember I didn't have a winter coat. The bus broke down. We had to walk from the arena back to the hotel. Then we got up in the morning and we're told that winds were too high and that we couldn't get a ferry out of Powell River towards Alberni Valley. So we had to go back to Horseshoe Bay, do a U-turn, then make the trip to Nanaimo, drive up the highway to Alberni, turn around, get back to Nanaimo for an afternoon game on Sunday. And then we couldn't get out of Nanaimo on Sunday. We had to spend the night in Nanaimo, come back on a Monday. And this is my first year, my first road trip, and I'm thinking to myself, what the hell did I just sign up for? But that was probably as bad as it got, and I had a lot of good years, a lot of great games to get to call hockey and be around those guys and Bobby and all the boys. Was a ton of fun and memories that I'll have forever calling those Rivermen games for sure.
Yeah, I'd say if you've not been around the BCHL before, it's a very, very, probably people don't get enough credit. It's like a very high level hockey, and it's proven that it's become a legitimate route to the NHL now.
More.
Yeah, it's just a couple of years ago there was 3 first-round picks to the end of the NHL draft right straight out of the BCHL. Like, that's not even going the college route first. And it's if for anybody in any of these small towns that have BCHL teams, are lucky to have them. It's great, fantastic.
Now go support that league for sure. It's dynamite. And what I love about it is that these kids are working towards something else, right? Like, not only do they all want to make it to the NHL, but they all want that scholarship and go out to continue their education. very smart, astute, driven athletes, and coached up the right way in that league as well. So it's high caliber hockey. Dante Fabro, Tyson Joe's coming out from Penticton just recently as well. So
Well,
lots of high caliber.
one of the kids, like Kevin Killistoff would have been your years. And I mean, you look at
Yeah.
him as he went through, like not only did he was the captain of Langley, he went through, but he went to Dartmouth. He's back now with an Ivy League degree and succeeding. And it's just, the success stories you see coming to that league, even beyond going pro, are just fantastic. Now I'm going to dive across, and this was something I not planned, but I see on the wall behind you, you have a stealth poster.
Yeah.
I'm
not gonna lie, I strategically kind of got that in the shot. That was one of my favorite days of work at the LAC with Dutchie and the comic Johnny Palace coming in, the finisher, the Punisher, Rory Smith in there as well. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we did the little kind of a comic-based ad campaign around some of the new guys, and of course Reese Dutch was one of the more of the key players that we had. But it was we shot in the dressing room, and you came in as the kind of the kingpin type person out of the Punisher, and he lit you up with a few balls in the dressing room.
Yeah, it's funny, I went to kind of go throw a shirt on. I thought I was going to throw maybe a Thunder shirt on, or even my shirt from the World Championships, which wasn't all that long ago. And I threw it on, and I was literally swimming in it. And that's only, I don't know what it is, 6-8 months ago now. So
hey, well, good.
It is what it is. I'm literally having to go clothes shopping every 6 months to kind of fill myself a closet.
Not the worst problem you could have, though. I'm sure you're okay with that.
You're looking pretty svelte there as well.
Yeah, when we're getting old, you got to start watching it now, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that was probably a good segue into the Worlds. Let's talk 2015. I remember in 2015 when we first coming out of Syracuse, we first announced that we were going to be hosting it, and I don't think there was a person on the planet more excited than you. I think you, over the last 4 years or the 4 years leading up to that, you told me how many times it was a dream of yours to call a World Final game. And so before we get there, just the tournament as an overall as an experience, like maybe a lot of stuff happened in that tournament. We went right down to we had a wedding proposal with Mexico. We had some great side games. Some new teams came up. It was the biggest, in the amount of team-wise, it was the biggest event they've ever held. So maybe before we talk about some of the key moments, why don't you tell us some of the other stuff that you remember about that you took away from the 2019 WLC?
Yeah, well, I remember kind of getting the announcement right. Stealth were pretty prevalent there as well, and I remember kind of getting that news in 2015 that the Worlds were coming, and I was so fired up. And then I kind of thought, man, like this is going to take forever to get here. 4 years, I'm going to have to wait for this. And then it just kind of seemed to like jump up, and it was here, and it was now, and man, when I got to find out that I was going to call the gold medal game, I was just over the moon. But the whole tournament as a whole, like everybody that I talked to, and I kind of made a habit of doing a lap or two around the concourse in between games or periods or whatever. And top to bottom, I think every single person that walked through the door at the Langley Event Center really enjoyed their experience there, not only from fans and managers and coaches, but the players as well. I think we're treated exceptionally well. I think the tournament ran without a hitch, really. Like there wasn't a whole lot of problems as far as I can remember, from my point of view anyway. And I know there was a huge viewing online, and it ended up Iroquois Canada, as everybody expected, in the final. And just a great, like it's a blur. I don't know what I call it, 22, 25 games or something like that in a 10-day stretch. Man, I'd line up to do that about 3 weeks in a row if I could do it again right now, man. But it was a grind, but then over, and I was kind of like, man, like that's it. It's done.
Well, one of the things that everybody knew like the blue group was going to be kind of the focus group. But what kind of caught me off guard? The best game that I remember, my favorite game from the tournament was Serbia-Ireland. It was I can't remember. It was a weekday morning game, round robin. Yeah. I think Serbia went up 5-0 right off the bat. And I mean, those are two fiery countries, right? Like a lot of spirit. When you get Ireland and Serbia going, you have the Gaichas playing for Serbia. And it was, I think Serbia went up 5-0 really quickly, and then Ireland battled back in the second half, and I think they ended up winning it 10-9. But I remember thinking like that was such a good representation of world lacrosse and what lacrosse was about, because it was just two fiery teams going at each other, nice goals, tons of spirit with a great finish. And I remember thinking like, it's too bad that game didn't get more views, because that was one of the best lacrosse games I think I've seen in this building, and I've seen a lot of lacrosse get played at Langley Event Center.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I kind of take away from that tournament is how passionate the fans were when they were backing their team and how into it they were. That I remember how many great jerseys were at that tournament, and then I remember like you said, some of those, like Costa Rica there for the first time, and when they would score a goal, their whole bench would just go absolutely berserk, and everybody on the floor was hugging like it was like they had just won the championship. And to see a first-time nation there that's fairly new at the sport, and there was a bunch there, to see how passionate and how much they enjoyed the moment. That's kind of the memories that I'll take away from those other countries is they're just starting their journey, but how much it meant to them to score a goal or whatever it was on the world stage.
Well, absolutely, in the grand scheme of things, lacrosse is still. I mean, I realize in reality, lacrosse is one of the older games, but right now, as it's breaking out into the and more into the mainstream, it's still in a bit in its infancy, and things like that are so big. When you see something jump to a 20-team tournament, all the way from 13, which was what it was prior in Syracuse, and just to see what they all took away from it. Like a lot of teams came knowing they weren't going to win it or compete,
sure.
And then they came out, competed, supported each other, and I think that there was a great camaraderie amongst all the teams, and people real eager to help each other out in the way. I know Canada went out and took out some of the showed up, went to their practices, and and it was really great to see the way the community came together, and it wasn't so much about we're here trying to win it. It's more we're here trying to be involved and grow the game in our country.
And I think at the end of the day, that was the cool part about it, is that you looked around at all the teams and there was representation mostly from Canada, whether it be Austria with guys like Kyle Sorensen and Julian Kolb helping those guys out, or Team Ireland and having Logan McBride helping those guys out. So there was always a little bit of Canadian flavor, box flavor of these guys kind of giving back to the sport and helping these national team programs get off the floor. And
yeah, it's funny to go back what you said. Every door I knocked on near the beginning was answered by a face I knew. I'm talking Garrett Billings is in a dressing room, Chris Hackle's in a dressing room. Dan Perreault with England. I mean, there's another story on its own as how well England did coming out of it. But you're right. Like you can really see how lucky we are in the lacrosse community that we have here in Canada and BC specifically. How much representation we had across the board in that tournament.
Absolutely, and like it was a privilege and a treat to get to broadcast, but part of me felt a little bit like I missed out on something, getting to be a part of that side of things, like having an impact on a nation that's maybe new to the sport or need a little bit of help. I kind of feel like I missed out on that part of it a little bit as far as the coaching goes. But man, again, I would not trade anything in the world for having the big chair for the gold medal game. That was the highlight of my career so far. That's for sure. I think it is anyway. It's right up there if it's not.
Well, it's okay. Well, that kind of leads me into here as we're gonna in closing. I thought with all the lacrosse you've done here, and we've done Minto Cups, you've done called junior, senior, NLL. Sorry.
Man Cup 2011.
Man Cup 2011. Like you've done such a range. Like if you had to narrow it down, I'm gonna really put you on the spot here. And we're going to eliminate that. We're going to put the WLC final as 1A, so you can skip that.
Okay.
But hit me with your three most memorable lacrosse moments of things you've called here. And they can be a event or a specific moment, but like what is it that kind of, if you were to, on your retirement dinner when you make your speech, what are the 3 points the key points you're going to hit?
Well, I will say the home opener for the Vancouver Stealth, sold out Langley Event Center against the Minnesota Swarm. I can't remember the year, 2014, I want to say, Tyler.
January 2014, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the atmosphere inside that building, the game was a low-scoring one. It did have a scrap in it. It wasn't particularly the Picasso of a lacrosse game, but just the fact the home team won and the building was absolutely rocking. The energy inside me when the anthem was going was off the charts. And it's funny, I go back and listen to the highlights of that game and how far I've changed since that game I called 6 years ago. But so that would be one for sure. I'll never forget the home opener. I still have that on my desktop background.
We've got, you're right, I think the final score in that game was 8-6. It was really low scoring. Funny side note, I think that the scrap in that game was Justin Salton and Logan Schuss, who ended up being teammates. And that was also, I know that jersey, actually, we sold Salt's jersey that was torn apart in an auction later on, and I think it went for pretty high. It was a good memory, but
you still give Salty the gears on that.
Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? It's a funny story for me on that is that I remember I invited we were pretty proud to have an NLL team in the building, and I invited my parents to come watch it. And I thought I'd least stay for the intros. I didn't think you'd be that into it, and so at halftime I didn't think they'd stick around. My mom's not really a a very high intensity person. And so I called their house at halftime to see what my mom thought of it. They didn't answer, so I called the next day, and my mom's going on. She just loved every second of it. They stayed for the game. She came back to many more. She thought lacrosse was the absolute best sport, which proves to me one of the things I've said all along is that lacrosse is one of the best spectator sports in the world. If my mom can get into it and love it, then you've got a winner.
Honestly, dude, I've been preaching to that choir for a long time that you just need to come and watch a game. And, it may not hook everybody like that after their first game, but more often than not, you're a sports fan or just like to be entertained and you come watch a pro lacrosse game, you're coming back the next time around.
All right, so, number 2.
Yeah, number 2, I think you probably know this, has got to be Game 5, Minto Cup 2016. And you think about that series, I think there was like a 3-2 game in that series. It came down to overtime, and it almost didn't come down to overtime because Del Bianco almost went full court at the buzzer at the end of regulation to win a Minto Cup, missing by about 6 inches.
Not only that, but he'd made 60 saves that game. Like, I still say that, forget Minto Cup. Forget Minto Cup. That was almost one of the best finishes in sports ever. Like, it was.
Really?
The goalie makes 60 saves. And then with 5 seconds left, scoops it up. And I was standing on the goal line at the east end when it hopped, and I had that feeling in my heart, like, that's going in. It hopped the crossbar by 8 inches. And it was
it would have been the craziest thing I'd ever seen in lacrosse for sure. But we talked about, it might have been the craziest thing I'd ever seen in sports because of what was on the line. It was a national championship. It was the 5th and deciding game. It was the end of regulation. And it was the goalie who almost scored the goal to win the championship.
He
was the MVP.
In a 4-4 game. Like, he'd already stood on his head all game. And then he's like, I'll just do it all myself, and goes to score the game winner.
And the look on his face afterwards when he missed, he's over at the bench getting a drink of water, ready for overtime, just as cool as a cucumber. And went out in overtime and slammed the door again. And then Coquitlam goes on to win the Minto Cup in 2016. So that's number 2 for sure. And number 3, man, I just want to take all of Langley Thunder lacrosse and kind of lump it into one, and everything that's kind of come and gone through the doors there at the LEC. I think of the playoff game with the Bellies and Brody McDonald and Matty Roy fighting. I think about the chair and Jared Harmon and his white glasses getting involved in the stands. And I think of
it hasn't been boring.
Yeah, and Ethan Iannucci and some of the just insane goals that he scored as a member of the Langley Thunder. So between the junior Thunder and the senior Thunder and a decade of calling those games, it's hard for me to kind of yank one out of there. But just as a whole, a lot of memories calling Thunder games for sure.
Well, that's awesome, Jake. I really appreciate you taking this time. Like, we could, like I said, you and I could probably just sit here and reminisce all day about the things we've gone through.
Well, we should. We shouldn't do it on air, but we should do that one.
And then we can tell the real stories too, right? Anyway, I really appreciate it. And I'm sure that over the course of this, we're going to find a reason to talk again. So, thanks a lot for your time. Episode 3 of Phone Calls with Friends, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Hey, my pleasure. It's been a great decade at the LEC, and hopefully the doors swing open again here soon, and we can start making some new memories soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake.
Yeah.